Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champion Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about gaming and mental health, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. With me each week are two amazing people who are Mitra Jordan and Dr. B, and I'm doing a little bit of a different intro because I still haven't written a new one yet. Our topic today is going to be about why change is hard, and you know what? We're changing right now because I don't have a new intro, like I said. But we're, you know what? I'm dealing with it fine. It's doing great. I think it's going great. How about you? Are you fine? Are you fine? I'm fine. Anywho, Mitra, Dr. B, who are you two for the fine folks who may not know?
I'm concerned is what I am.
I'm very concerned. What's happening here?
I don't know. It's a weird day.
Slow it down.
Did I put the right code in? No, I didn't. The code's wrong on the screen. I'll fix that. Who are you two?
Feeling your feet in the ground right now. Just center.
After you.
Okay, fine. Let's do it. Hi. So I'm Mitra Jordan. I'm a therapist working out of Victoria, British Columbia. I'm a registered clinical counselor here, and I often see people who are people. God, see, this is really tough. I often see people who are, of course, looking to find ways to change something in their lives. You know, people come to therapy sometimes for a check-in, but quite often because they feel there's something that they'd like to shift, right? And change is hard. I mean, intros are hard, apparently. So I'll stop talking now and pass it over to my fine colleague.
This is the thing. We haven't all three been on at the same time for the last 2 weeks, so we're still getting back into this groove.
Yeah, no.
Whatever we need to tell ourselves. No.
Yeah, no, we're just gonna go all weird sisters and be like, when shall we again meet? About a month out. I don't know.
Yeah, next week. Looks like it's next week. Next Tuesday sound good to you? How's that?
Next Tuesday's
my next Tuesday's freed open. Yeah.
Call it a day right now.
Okay, print it, ship, done. But in case we still have to broadcast for the next 50 odd minutes, I'm Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons. I'm a clinical psychologist in Washington State, and I'm the clinical director of what was, at the time, the very first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community, TakeThis.org. And I'm happy to say that we're about to celebrate our 10th year of being around serving the game community, 1 full decade, and I'm very excited about that.
Heck yeah.
Make sure to go check out TakeThis.org. We've got some revamped resources on there and some wonderful new stuff. And I'm also an expert on the applied use of things like Dungeons and Dragons, which is why we've got geeky shenaniganry around my office. And I'm here.
Is my new favorite word.
Shenaniganry.
I like it.
Yeah, but we're talking about change.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like one of the things that I hear the most, hey, change sucks.
Yeah.
So why don't we like change? Where do we want to start with that?
Well, so very frequently when I talk with my clients, and I'm sure Mitra is going to chime in and be like, yeah. When I ask clients about what their hesitation to, change, and I'm being really literal about it, like I'm like, what's getting in the way of changing, and why not just change right now? And their response is always this rote, well, there's no reason I shouldn't change, because there's like this myth that we've internalized that change is always good. Change is always easy. And we should absolutely embrace change. Let me tell you, I'm going to do a show one day on the merits of the comfort zone. All right.
Oh yeah.
The comfort zone is comfortable. It's nice in here. All right.
It's familiar. And even if it's not nice in here, I can't stress how it's familiar can feel safe enough times. And we are wired for safety.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so there's so actually before we get into that, we probably should just front load this. This is a mental health show. We are going to be talking about hard mental health issues. Today, we're probably going to be talking a lot more about things like diet and exercise, or even like maybe even substance use, because when it comes to behavior change, it's kind of low hanging fruit. It's very frequently the stuff people talk to us about, changing behavioral habits, especially related to health. So just, front loading it with the warning there. But yeah, familiarity. I like this. This is what I know. This is predictable. This is good.
Yep. This is what we are habituated to.
Mm-hmm. I've always
whatever
thought in my
this
head,
may be.
predictability and that zone of comfort is like a nice beanbag. I don't know why.
It's nice.
Like the one that you just sink into. Your feet aren't even touching the ground. You're just like, I don't want to move. No, I'm good. I like this.
Nah, it's like that hoodie, that favorite hoodie.
Yeah. Yeah, even if it's getting frayed around the edges, we still have a relationship with it. And I think this is what it is. We have a relationship with whatever it is that is our comfort zone or that provides comfort in our lives. So, for example, if somebody wanted to quit smoking, smoking is serving a role. Smoking might be something you do socially. Smoking might be something you do to take a few minutes as a break between one thing and another. It's a stress relief. So it's going to have a role in your life as something that's a go-to coping tool. And this goes for having, a drink or eating your favorite candy or whatever it is. These are not all bad things. It's not that. But it's just the proportions that we sometimes struggle with and decide we want to change. So if we're going to replace a coping tool, if we're going to not do, I should say, a certain thing, whether it's I'm going to eat less sugar or I'm going to go for walks in the evening instead of just sitting down in front of the TV or whatever it is, and I'm not judging any of these activities. I love a good couch potato surf. That's me. I'm the potato and I surf on the couch watching a show or whatever. But so there's not a judgment there. It's just that if somebody comes and they say, I want to change X thing, that's tough because it's like, what am I replacing it with? And what's its purpose in my life? Okay.
Well, I think that's a conversation that I often have with clients, Mitra, about like fundamental purpose of things, because, very often, especially if it's a habit that is considered either socially unacceptable, like, fewer and fewer smoke cigarettes these days, at least in the United States. And we don't often think about some of the secondary or even primary roles that fulfills. Like, when I've talked to friends who wanted to quit smoking, we get into the nitty gritty of it. And one, there's a physical, especially if you've been doing it a while, there's a physical aspect to it. I mean, there's actual physiological dependence on certain things, and giving that up sucks.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's also rituals and predictability. And I don't think any of us who have gone through the last, 3 years with the pandemic can argue that predictability is important for our well-being. And and when we have that taken away from us, so often our stress levels just fly through the roof to do this thing that is supposed to make us feel better.
Yeah. You're replacing a known thing with an unknown thing. And you also have to have the time and space to do the change, whatever it is. Like if someone wants to change how they eat, they have to have the means to change up their what they're buying for groceries. They may have to spend more money. They probably will certainly have to spend more time. They may have to start cooking or organize their time differently. So it's not just about the will and the motivation to do something. It's also about the context in which you're operating and whether you're actually able to put those things into effect. One of the reasons we often suggest small changes first is because a small change might be easier to put into effect. Being able to actually succeed on that change, or the kinds of struggles you have while you're trying to change that one thing, say, really points to what is standing in the way in your life, or what sorts of things you're likely to encounter if you make a bigger change. And so just as with anything, taking a smaller risk and practicing, if you will, on that is often way a better indicator of success, right? It can be really sexy to think about, or seductive to think about, I'm going to make all these big changes and I'm going to, follow this new book or whatever. And it's pointing to these 14 steps I need to take. And I got to go throw out everything in my cupboards and buy all this other stuff, whatever it is. And I'm going to do this thing.
See, here's the thing. I've literally lived this.
Yeah.
Content warning, this is about dieting. I did the Whole30 diet, and I was like really gung-ho about it. And I was
that's
like,
cutthroat, man.
Oh, yeah. And then I started doing it, and like 5 days in, I'm just like, this is the worst thing I've ever done. It was to the point that I was like, literally every thought I was having was about what the next meal prep was going to be. Because I had to worry about that at such a constant rate of like, okay, well, there can't be any sugar in this, there can't be any oil on this one. Okay, we can't have that. And then of course there was the inevitable day, 16 days in, that I accidentally ate something that had cheese in it. And according to Whole30, you got to start all over. And I was like, no, my mental health is more important than this.
No, you never have to start all over. That is the most ridiculous thing ever. That is one of the reasons I absolutely hate that. I am going to foam at the mouth about it in a minute. Like that is ridiculous.
Well, okay, no. So here, I'm gonna try and articulate what I think Mitra and I are both agitated about here. Because there's this old myth, and it still gets really perpetuated, of this all or nothing change is either successful or it's not, when a lot of the modern research on behavior change shows that lapses, not relapses, because they're not the same thing. Lapses and essentially backsliding is expected. Change is not a linear progress, towards a goal. It is oscillations, which we want, we typically want to see an upward trend. And this is part of the reason that, I knew plenty of people who went on the Whole30 about 10 years ago, and when they described it to me, I'm just like, this sounds like a terrible idea. This absolutely sounds like a terrible idea, because it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
everything
all
we
or
don't
nothing.
want. We do not want that. In terms of your psychological health, your mental health, all of your healths, it's a bad idea. All them healths. It's just absolutely terrible, because if you somebody's asking a question I want to quickly ask. Can we get a clarification on how lapse and relapse differ? So a lapse is like, I went out and I ate a salad and I thought it was all fine, and I even asked if they had sugar in it, maybe, and then I found out afterwards there was sugar in the dressing.
Yeah.
Well, raspberry vinaigrette is tart.
That's
otherwise
different. Yeah, that's different than screw this, I'm going to just have a candy bar now. Or I'm just finding it impossible to resist whatever.
Right.
That's relapse. But I would expect to see both, actually, in a change process. I would hope more lapses than relapses, because I think that you can associate that with your own sense of failure, and that's a problem. But you need to find a way to cope with the possibility of both. What are we going to do when we have had enough and take a night off from something? How are we going to come back from that? What are we going to do when accidentally we find out there was alcohol in the Christmas pudding or whatever, and we just feel bad about that because of our own journey? Like,
Well,
you
and that's
know?
what I mean. That's where I hope people are working with mental health professionals
Yep.
who are going to help guide them along this stuff, because this all or nothing thinking of very frequently in the clients that I work with, that is a trap
Yeah.
for getting in the way. If I can't do it perfectly, I may not as well do it at all. That if I, if I can't beat, if I can't get all the treasure in the dungeon when I'm looting it, what's the point of doing any dungeon crawling at all?
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, we absolutely get in our own way by having that all or nothing thinking so often. Not that I've got 15 thoughts just like crashing in my brain at once.
Yeah. This is a big topic.
Yeah.
This really is. This is
mean,
complicated.
This is for full disclosure. Like, this is one of the fastest shows that we outlined because we just had so much on the sheet.
Yeah.
In so fast of time.
Oh God, yeah.
So I want to bring attention to one thing that speaks to why Whole30 and sort of regimen type programs, books that say do this step, this step, this step, or
the 14
don't
steps
eat
towards
this.
bringing joy back to my life by getting rid of the
Why?
things that I haven't used in 15 seconds.
Oh God, right. Don't, man. Don't. Okay, so and I'm not suggesting you don't declutter. It's not that. But anyway, back to this whole idea of the step-by-step thing. It's compelling because change is so hard and can be so overwhelming. So we don't want to feel like we have to reinvent the wheel. And so we look at what is out there that people have already done. What's going to work? What have people had some success with? You start researching and you maybe land on something like the Whole30, because there's a lot of people who certainly are very in favor of it, have written cookbooks about it, talk very promisingly about it, have talked about how it changes their life. And that's just an example of any of these sorts of things where somebody is like, well, you change this and it'll change your life and it'll be easy and I'm going to show you how to do it. And you just follow along this yellow brick road and it will take you right where you want to go. Right. So,
no, I've joked about this. I've joked about this on this show many times. But if we had one simple answer for everything, I wouldn't have student loans anymore. I absolutely wouldn't.
I'd be so wealthy.
I know.
That's okay.
Seriously,
I'm happy with my life. I'm just saying, though.
If there was one easy answer for all of this, we would have found it by now, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. And it's I want to address something. Actually, I want to address something in the chat. Change is not brainwashing yourself, BT dubs. No. Okay. And if you've got a question about why that's being muted, is because that is incredibly stigmatizing language to be using about positive change processes. Positive change for the better is not about brainwashing. And it is changing for the better is a complicated process that's brought about by essentially bringing in systemic factors, physical factors, and a lot of difficulty changing things that very well might have been functional in your life at one point. Because that's so often why we do things in the first place, because they serve a functional purpose. And now we're trying to change that. And that is hard. And I take personal umbrage with the sort of levity thrown around that sort of concerted, honest effort.
It's actually coming into yourself in some ways, as opposed to leaving yourself, which brainwashing to my mind is a kind of a leaving or a disconnecting of yourself. To say that that you're going to take on something other than you in order to change, right? Or you're going to lose parts of the self in order to change. That's not it. In fact, often when we talk about changing a habit, say an eating habit or a drinking habit or whatever, a habit that affects our bodies, the first thing we need to do is come into our body, recognizing what takes us there, understanding why I need to smoke right now, for example, what's happening physiologically, what's happening emotionally. So it's about a deeper connection with the self, and change that is outside of the self, that is a kind of just walking along someone else's path, isn't going to stick. You know, it's not about being connected to the self. And the changes that do stick, that work long term, really have to do with that connection.
Well, and intrinsic motivation, because that's
Yeah.
a big thing. One of the things that I like to talk to people about is cost and benefits to change. And very frequently when I ask them about what's the benefit of staying the same, their response is, well, there is no benefit to staying the same. And that is BS. If
Yeah.
there was no benefit to staying the same, we wouldn't do it.
Yep.
You know, we get reinforced for staying the same in a lot of different ways. And very frequently, a lot of our behaviors were functional. And that's why we did it at one point. It serves a very functional purpose. But then we just have very real conversations about what are the costs of changing. And very frequently, the costs of changing are, you know, their effort. They're a loss of predictability, things we've already talked about. And so at that point, when I'm working with clients, what we have to do is figure out what are the reasons, what are the intrinsic motivators, both short-term and long-term, for that change. Because for a lot of folks, we haven't even talked about salience yet. Like, for better health, okay, what does that mean? When we talk to people, okay, for better health, but let's make it salient to you, relatable to you, so you have investment in this. And that is often something that's missing when people make this decision that I'm going to change, with no real internal anchor, all or nothing thinking. And it's a collision of bad situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, sure, you know, say you're wealthy enough, or you are in a position where you've really needed some form of rehab, okay? Or you decide you're going to go to some kind of diet spa situation. I don't know much about these places in terms of the steps that they follow, but I'm just going to say, if you take yourself out of your daily living context in order for change to happen, with, say, a bunch of emotional support around you, short-term change is possible. Even somewhat coercive short-term change may be possible. But eventually, people will resist coercion, because by nature, we resist coercion, and so we should, right? We need to feel agents of our own change. That is such a critical aspect of good
Empowerment.
change. Empowerment, exactly. Yeah. So, but say we are along for the ride that we really want, right? We take ourselves out of our context, off we go, 6 weeks, something or the other. We lose the weight, get healthier, whatever. We come back into our life context. Now what? This is where the rubber really hits the road.
Absolutely.
And this is the reason why change is so difficult as well. We have a life context that may have given us permission or supported our behavior, or a friend group that always meets at the pub, or we don't cook much, we eat out or order out, not because we're wealthy, maybe it's McDonald's or whatever we can afford, but our life may not have set us up for success in terms of some of the health habits that we want. Maybe we want to go for a walk, but we live in a really dense urban neighborhood without sidewalks. This is the thing,
geez, yeah.
right?
Yep,
or
my
it's
old
super
place.
hot all the time, right?
Yep.
Are you really going to be able to go outside and get that exercise? And how are you going to afford that gym or whatever, right?
Not
So
when
we're
I'm
just
dodging
talking
cars.
about the reality of people's experience that make it so difficult. It's not that we want to use these experiences as excuses, but people often confuse the looking at the reality of their experience with now you're just making excuses. And the problem is these people who are writing these self-help books aren't taking your life into account. You got to take your life into account and understand what's doable for you.
100%. And can I throw in a very tangible and very painful example for this that is a little different than what we've been talking about so far. I have no shortage of friends who are raised in extremely tight-knit evangelical conservative religious families, and that's their whole world and their whole community, and that's their whole support network. And several of them, so I'm not outing anyone, several of them left when they discovered those communities, those families, even when they discovered that their children were LGBTQIA+. And suddenly the immediate family is condemning the children as demonic or the parents as godless. And in order for them to leave those communities, to make that change, they gave up everything they knew. And this gets into what Mitra's talking about it's not just changing a behavior. There's ripple effects throughout the entirety of your ecosystem. And in certain cases, it means turning your back on everything you once knew. And if you're going to tell me that that ain't hard, I'm going to laugh in your face.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the first thing we often talk to people about is like, okay, you want to change. What's your support system?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much harder without one.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's imperative to protect the life of your children and who they are in the instance that you're talking about, Dr. B. I mean, you're not really left with a sense of choice there at all. And often I think we do struggle with how to be in integrity with ourselves and do change in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break to remind our viewers of our disclaimer. I know we've already been talking for a half hour.
We got heated.
Yes. And when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about this and then check out what questions chat's been having. Remember, you can still ask your questions in chat. Put question, then your question, and our awesome mods, Mars and Jordan, will grab those. But we will be right back after this disclaimer.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about this before checking in with chat. What all else do you want to touch on this subject?
Like Mitra, how do you work with people to really get them to change? We've been talking about for what gets in the way, but how do you, especially given some of the ADHD folks you work with, some of the autistic folks you work with, because we've got our own challenges in terms of executive functioning, planning, strategizing, response inhibition, and so forth. The marshmallow test was kind of made for us to fail. If you're not familiar with that, I can talk about it later. But like, how do you work with folks for that?
Well, I think first of all, it really is important to get a clearer sense of the life context in which they're in and where have they had successes with change in the past as well. Like what's really worked for them, right?
So empowerment.
Yeah, and looking at their resources in a more clear-eyed way. And then I would get them to do one small change.
Okay.
And see how it feels to do that change. So if someone were to come in and say to me, yeah, I really want to quit smoking. Okay. We get a clearer sense of who they are and what's going on and what stressors they're dealing with. If their father just died, I might say, is this a good time? Well, maybe it is, because their father may have, died of lung cancer or something. I am really just inventing all of this. I don't actually have a client in this situation, to be very, very clear. But if I did, it would be like, yeah, I get it. This is, in some ways, there's grieving, there's things that have scared the bejesus out of you now. And like, you're ready to look at this. Okay, what does change mean for you? What do you want to replace that cigarette with? What is happening in your day? Where are the breaks where you smoke? What could you do instead? Because you absolutely cannot take away a habit without replacing it with something.
It's so hard. It's just having that absence in I do similar work with people, and having that void in terms of people's behavior is often so much harder than having a substitute.
Absolutely. So we might say something like, okay, let's start by replacing the 4 o'clock cigarette with a walk, a cup of tea, a call with a friend, a something, right? Do you have people in your life who've quit before? Do you have a support system for quitting? Are there people you can talk to when you feel like you really want a cigarette? Would journaling help? Like, would art help? Would poetry help? I don't know. Like, what do you like to do, right? What thing that you like can you replace that 4 o'clock cigarette with? And then we're not going to try to replace all of them yet.
And one of the things you're doing is often something I do with people is just work with them incrementally, and given the age of the folks I work with, and they tend to be really big nerds, we talk about it in terms of like D&D.
Yeah.
You don't go from level 1 to level 20 immediately. You don't take your level 1 characters and be like, yeah, we're going to be big, strong heroes, and throw them at a, I don't know, let's pick something. The whatchamadonut, brain go boo.
Okay, well, if you're changing out your spells, you still want the same number of spell slots.
Which I've apparently given up because I'm having word finding issues right now. You don't take level 1 characters and throw them at a gold dragon. Okay.
Exactly.
And a Tarask. Thank you, gambler. Thank you. It's level 1s versus a Tarask. You don't do that, because even if they're like, oh, we're going to be big, mighty heroes, and we believe we can. Yeah. I also believe that Tarask is going to stomp you
a lot. And each
exactly. And
your
then
willpower only goes so far.
Yeah. And then you feel like, you've experienced failure, even though really it wasn't ever a fair fight. But, then you experience failure, and then you're like, yeah, I can't do that. Right? Because it's demoralizing. So every challenge that we set ourselves has to be appropriate, a little hard. If it's too easy, it doesn't feel like we're doing anything. But a little bit of a challenge, tiny bit, right? But manageable. Right? You go all the way to the Tarask and you're like, this is so demoralizing. I can't even. Like, there's no way.
You were at that fight, were you?
I was right there. Also, if I were standing at the base of Everest, there's nothing that could induce me to climb it. I guess maybe that little hill over there, though. Like, you're going to lose oxygen a third of the way up. Like, come on. Nobody's going to want to carry your bags for you. I'm just saying.
Don't you want to climb Mount Everest? No, I'm good.
Nah.
I'm really good. I'm never.
Are you weak-willed? No, I'm strong-willed enough to say I don't want to do that.
But
I'm going to say that's not my challenge.
In the words of Mitch Hedberg, I do want to hang out at base camp.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Sounds great. You got hot cocoa, just hanging out with people.
No, that's awesome. These incremental thing, and one of the things I work with people is how to overcome setbacks, because the setbacks are almost inevitable. We hear stories about people who are just like, I'm going to will myself into this extreme behavior change. Cool, good for you. If that works for you, you are the exception, and it is not a moral failure that we can't do that.
Also, that might last a couple of weeks. It might actually last a while, but the problem is, whatever change we incorporate has to fit somewhere in our lives. It has to work with and not against our lives. So if it's a change that just was really uphill, Sisyphean, if you will, if the boulder doesn't have a landing place when it gets to the top, it's rolling down.
It's true.
There goes my earpiece. Scrolling down. But yeah, if the boulder doesn't have, a landing place, good luck to you. It needs to have somewhere to settle, or it back, all the way to the bottom.
I really do want to highlight though the you're the exception, not the rule. Like that one little sentence has changed my perspective on talking to people so much when they're just like, oh yeah, no, it's so easy. I just stopped doing it. It was the easiest thing in the world. You could do it. And it's just like, you are the exception. You are not the rule. It was easy for you. You do not know the situation that I am currently in my life.
Right. I also think it's easy if it's not a terribly ingrained habit. For example, I actually experimented with smoking around the age of 18 to 19.
I want pictures of Rebel Mitra.
And I was able to give it up. It never went beyond 4 or 5 cigarettes a day. I thought I was being cool.
Yeah.
And at that point, you could smoke in restaurants.
Oh,
whoa, I'm old. Yeah, I know, right? So I'm just like I'm a dinosaur over here. But the point is, it was easy to quit because it hadn't taken hold.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about people who are like, oh yeah, it was a piece of cake, they're coming from that place.
Cake?
Maybe they
Cake?
I'm not ready to give up cake, guys. But they're coming from a place of, it was not a very established thing. It was not a core thing. It was not sustaining them. It was not their go-to. I wasn't going to give up chocolate. Let's be really clear. Not back then, not today.
Well, and you're also, we're getting back to intrinsic motivation and figuring out what purposes things serve. I mean, I often work with kids who are engaged in problematic technology usage, and I tend to eschew the word addiction, because addiction is a very specific thing, and very often the problematic technology use that the kids I'm working with it's fulfilling a purpose for them that no adult has really explored with them yet. That this is their social life, and so for them to give up their gaming would give up their entire social life. And so we have to figure out how to as we've been talking about, supplement that social life while altering the pattern of behavior that's getting in the way of other things.
And
so we still keep the function, getting rid of the behavior.
Like even you were talking about with the smoking of just like, okay, we're gonna replace your 4 o'clock cigarette or something like that. In college, I hung out with a group of people who did smoke, and like I would go hang out with them because you couldn't smoke on campus, so we'd go walk across the street and we'd hang out over there for a little bit while they had their morning cigarette, and then we'd go back over. And the days that my schedule was off from them, I eventually found it that I was sitting in the cafeteria going, today feels weird. Why is it feel? Because it felt weird for even me who wasn't smoking to not go out there and hang out for a little bit and then come back, because it was a habit every other day.
Yeah.
We have our rituals. We have our predictability. We have our routines. Those are things that help us get through. They build resilience, predictability, and routines.
Mm-hmm.
And often our go-tos that we use to soothe ourselves are also easy. It is easier to go out and smoke a cigarette or get a glass of wine or whatever than it is to go for a walk, for example. Of course. At the end of the day, it's easy. You want to comfort yourself and a piece of chocolate cake does the job. That's a lot easier.
Well, I've got 8 of them.
Than talking about your feelings. It's easier than reaching out and taking a risk sometimes. This is not a moral judgment. We all do it.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to sometimes not talk about my feelings. It's easier for all of us.
I just don't have them.
Right.
I don't have feelings. It just makes my life so much easier.
I've decided that I'm doing the Borg 30.
I'm in.
The cover
resistance
of the book.
bands are futile.
Yeah, the cover of the book, the Borg 30. You will be assimilated.
I love that. I want to address a comment that was made by Space Lancer Jericho. My father went cold turkey after smoking for 30 years. And it took a week in the motel alone with zero outside contact. It took us years to have him understand why it was hard for my sister to give it up. This is really interesting. I related to this because my grandfather actually gave up smoking after 30 years. He also did it cold turkey. I think that was quite common years ago for people to do this sort of thing. Now, the interesting thing with my grandfather is that he'd had a few visits with his doctor by this point, and he had heart disease. And I think he had angina at that point. I don't know if he'd had an early stroke or something, but I know that he had had an extremely blistering and serious talking to. So he had had the wake-up call.
Yeah.
So I will say that this is an interesting one because wake-up calls can absolutely lead to change. And for some people, they can even lead to sustained change. But you need to keep in mind that for others, they won't. There's been a bunch of research done on change, our perceptions of change, and insight, and education, right? And often when we think about people quitting smoking or whatever it is, right, we label the packages. We talk about the risks of cancer. We talk about this, that, and the other. In other words, we're trying to provide a lot of education, possibly for insight, right? You know, you go get the chest x-ray and it shows that, you know, so there's lots of ways of showing, hey, this thing is destructive. Now, for some people, that will work, particularly when coupled with a wake-up call. But for others, it won't.
Yeah.
In fact, for many people, their own justifications will outweigh insight. And we have to think about how deeply ingrained then that coping tool is for them.
I've literally been in this conversation where someone was telling me about their wake-up call and then told me that this conversation was my wake-up call, and I looked at them and I said, you have put way more weight on this conversation than it actually has.
Yep, absolutely.
You are far more invested into what you are saying than what I am taking away from it.
Oh my God. I need that cross stitch. You are grossly overestimating the importance of this conversation to me.
Yeah.
Okay, let's check in with chat real quick. We did get quite a few questions. We're probably not going to get to all of them, but like I say, we have a episode at the end of the season where we go back and take questions from past episodes, so it might pop up there. So let's see. One of the ones I wanted to do was Reaver01 said, question, what has helped encourage positive change in our hosts considering their idiosyncrasies?
Ooh.
Which, by the way, I don't think I've ever seen that word written out before, and that was fun to sound out in my head.
Love it.
Idiosyncrasies?
Our idiosyncrasies, of
Or
which
hosts.
we have plenty.
I mean, hosts is a tough word.
Yeah.
Hosta.
Okay. Mitra, you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah. I gotta get
I have one if you want some time. What?
No,
Go ahead.
I actually went through a weight loss process shortly before I had vein surgery, and it was a pretty minor thing. Thank you, Grandma, for those varicose veins. Love you so much, and also those years of standing on my feet as a chef, super helpful. Anyway, there I was. And the vein surgeon said to me, well, if you could lose 10 to 12 pounds, we wouldn't need to think about blood thinners. But it kind of puts you in the next weight category up if you don't. And that was a wake-up call where I realized that I wasn't just chubby, that it was actually going to affect my health in this very real way. Because, I'm super active and all that. And, I've already seen, there's been no limitations on what I can physically do. So this was really the first time I was like, okay, so it's not just a visual thing that I feel I'm not super fond of my bottom right now. No, it's more like this actually has an effect. And that did actually cause me to go on a bit of a weight loss journey, which was sustainable until, thank you, COVID, I did gain some weight back. But for the most part, I've stayed pretty healthy after that. So that was the wake-up call version. The other version for me has really been having the time. And this is such a luxury.
Yeah.
Being able to have a little time off at points in my life has really helped me just do a little assessment of how am I doing? What's it feel like to contemplate coming back into my usual busyness? do I like it? Is there anything I want to change? So that time to reflect is pretty key. And I'm very fortunate. I'm very privileged to have had it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For me, small measurable goals, externalized accountability, so structure.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of the reason that when I was studying for my licensure exam, I started streaming my study sessions, because then I had an audience on a regular schedule that I was accountable for and accountable
those are
to.
good streams. I like those streams.
Yeah.
If I weren't working 50 hours a week, I'd probably still be doing them. But the other thing is really measurable progress and ongoing measurements. Like after grad school, I was not healthy, because you're not after grad school.
No. Nope.
And so I wanted to get back into a place of greater physical fitness, and just for the sake of, just feeling better, and being able to track my progress, whatever that progress was, in incremental ways, whether that is I put 5 more pounds of weight on the bar this week, or I measured this week and I'm 2 pounds towards my goal, whatever goal that might be. So incremental measurements, really, really measurable goals, externalized regular accountability for me, because if I'm accountable just to me, I failed the marshmallow test.
Yeah.
Lauren really wants to know what the marshmallow test is, by the way.
For the sake of irony, because that test is about delayed gratification, I'm not saying. Oh,
God, I love you so
also,
much.
it's really fun. Go look it up. It's awesome.
Salience of goals, really salient goals. And what I mean by that is it can't it can't just be like this nebulous idea of I'll get physically fit. No, I need to know what that means.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to know. I need to know when because if I'm running a marathon, I want to know if I've crossed. I'm not running a marathon. I've got 200 minutes, but I want to know when I've crossed that finish line. And so I need to know when I'm getting towards that goal. Those are the 4 things that help me.
I mean, mine's very, very simple. I mean, like the funny thing is mine is sort of like the Whole30. Like the first time though that I did NaNoWriMo, which by the way, it's coming up right now. If you don't know, that's National Novel Writers Month, and the point is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And the first time I decided to do this, I did a whole bunch of prep and getting ready before that, and then I would block out time in my day that I was like, okay, this is the time that I'm going to write 1,667 words and go. And I did it, and I wrote the 50,000 words. And the thing is, though, is that what that did was give me, 1, hey, I can write a book. 2, I know how to write a book. And so it gave me and I don't write a book in 30 days now, but I know how I can sit down and do it, how I can block out that time, how I can do this. It was honestly the more healthier version of the Whole30, because I took more away from it than that. But yeah, that's mine. I talked too much there.
Should I?
No, I think that's great. Yes, I know what you're going to say.
I just feel that all that is Catholic guilt in me is bubbling up.
Okay. We'll round out the show by you saying.
Okay. The marshmallow test. I'm sorry, Lauren. I'm sorry. Like again, Catholic guilt. I'm just like, I can't escape it. I still feel guilt in Latin, but so the marshmallow test was a test, a very famous psychological test of delayed gratification in kids, where you would give the choice between an immediate reward, and they could have like 2 marshmallows right now, or if they waited 10 minutes, they would definitely get 1 more marshmallow in 10 minutes. But if they waited 10 minutes without touching the marshmallows they had now, they would get 5 in total. Not 3, 5.
Is a marshmallow in hand worth 2 extra, as it were?
Are they Peeps? Because no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know,
no,
right?
Peeps. I just knocked the table over.
Yeah.
No, yeah, God, I am glad I
This
didn't
is
go
a
through that
s-
as a child.
Yeah, but this is also assuming you like marshmallows, though.
It's true.
I like mine toasted. Okay, if I get the 5 later, can I get them toasted? Like these are
Well,
the kinds of questions I would have been asking.
well, that's different motivation because you're less motivated at that point.
Yes, if it had been sour candy as a child, like forget it.
Can I just
Don't
point out that
you know,
3
yeah.
ADHD people in here were given an option and they went, but that doesn't spark dopamine. Can I get it to spark dopamine? You know what? That's going to be my new one. It's not that this sparks, this sparks dopamine.
What was that?
We need t-shirts, we need hoodies.
I love it. Okay, I think that is a great place to start wrapping up this episode. Friends, where can people find you on the interwebs if they would like to do so?
Oh, people can find me at mitrajordan.com or, of course, on Twitter at my Twitter handle right there. And I am relatively available to people, but Dr. Boccamazzo over here, long Italian
Ooh.
name guy, is
Ooh.
everywhere.
I'm everywhere. I'm
He's
I'm
everywhere.
around just
He's
perpetually.
everywhere.
Get a hat and just be like, ah.
Exactly. Very good.
But you can find me on all the socials at the Dr. B. That's TheEDOC2RB as in boy. But more than that, make sure to follow Take This Org on Twitter, on Facebook, on the Twitches, and all of the things, and keep up to date on what we're doing.
Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at the Treavor. There is an A hiding in there. Thank you to Jordan and Mars for moderating the chat today and doing a fantastic job. And thank you all so much for joining us as we have these interesting conversations about why we hate change.
We fear change.
We fear change. Yes.
Terrifying.
But yeah, thank you to Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org for giving us the opportunity to have these conversations. I believe the rest of the schedule for this week is normal as is written on the Reddit, Twitch, or not Reddit, Discord, and Twitter. There we go. I got them all out there. So if you have any questions about that, you can check that there. But that is going to do it for this week's episode. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.